How's it going? Good. So my name is Mark Mazzina. I'm a state legislative program coordinator for Students for Life Action. That basically means I help run the state legislative program. We engage in a bunch of different states around the country trying to pass pro-life legislation, strong bills that are actually going to save lives. And today we're going to talk about, as you can see, translating election wins into legislative successes. So I want to preface this a little bit by saying you're going to hear me bash on politicians a lot during this presentation. I do want to say this doesn't mean, so I'm going to sound pretty grumpy, right? This doesn't mean that politicians are necessarily like inherently bad people, right? They're not necessarily, people with like malicious intentions or anything like that. In fact, a lot of times they're very nice people, and that's actually how they get elected. It turns out it's actually hard to get elected if you're just a complete jerk to everybody. So, but the reason why we have to be kind of skeptical of politicians, and we have to treat them the way that we do, is because politicians are in an environment when they're in elected office where it is very, very easy for them to do nothing, and it's very, very hard for them to do something controversial. And that actually turns out to be a big problem for us because we want them to do something controversial. Who here knows that abortion is widely considered to be a controversial issue? Does everyone know that? Okay. So we're asking politicians to go on record on something very difficult. And when you're in elected office, you don't really want to do that. So that's what we're going to talk about. So our goals, first of all, are turning electoral wins into laws. You will find a lot of very well-intentioned pro-life activists who believe, okay, we just need to get Republicans elected. As long as the Republican Party wins, like that's good. That's all we need. I can tell you from experience, there are states where we literally have 80% Republican majorities in the legislature. 80% of the legislature is Republican, and it is like pulling teeth to get these people to pass pro-life laws. There's no reason why they shouldn't be able to do it. They dominate the legislature, and yet it can be very difficult to get them to do anything. Sharing success stories. When we do manage to win and pass pro-life bills, we want to make sure that we share the tools and the tactics that we used to accomplish that with other people around the country so that we can replicate it in other states. Tackle key issues. We want to pass strong bills that actually do something, that save lives. We don't just want to pass, kind of weak sauce, pro-life license plates. I don't know the exact statistics on how many lives have been saved by pro-life license plates, but I can't imagine it's very high. There are some much, much stronger bills that we want to pass that are actually directly going to save lives here and now. And mobilize the pro-life generation. We want people like you, who are up and coming to gain the relevant experience in the real world of politics so that you can be leaders later on down the road. How do we get here? And I'm just going to kind of let this, simmer with you guys. I'm not going to answer this for you, but, just think about what is the state of the pro-life movement right now, and how does it compare to other movements within conservatism in general? Because we can learn a lot in the pro-life movement from different issues and different movements that have maybe started in one place and have been able to build through legislation and activism. Now, the way that Students for Life Action is different than a lot of other pro-life organizations, and specifically I want to focus on the second one here. Students for Life Action is willing to be the bad guy. Now, when I say the bad guy, obviously I don't actually mean that we're doing something bad. Really what that means is we're just willing to tell the truth. But a lot of times politicians in the political class don't want you to tell the truth. If they're killing bills behind the scenes, if they're not voting the way that they're telling their constituents they are on pro-life issues, they don't want people to know that. So all we're doing is telling people what's really going on. We're not lying, we're not just attacking people for no reason, we're just telling the truth. But that can be a really hard thing to do when you're talking about the world of politics. So there's an old Aesop's fable where there's a group of mice and there's a cat, and the cat is eating the children of the mice, and the mice want that, obviously, to stop. So the mice decide amongst themselves, okay, one of us needs to put a bell on the cat so that we know when the cat is coming so that we can all scatter, we can all get out of there, right? The problem is none of the mice actually wants to be the one to go put the bell on the cat. So no one does it, right? And some of them decide, well, maybe instead of doing that, we should just try to, make friends with the cat. Maybe then the cat will stop eating our children. But that's not in the cat's nature, right? The cat's nature is to continue doing that. So we want to be the ones to actually put the bell on the cat. We want to be the ones to do the difficult, courageous things that might make us unpopular, might be hard to do, in order to actually accomplish the things that we want to accomplish in the world of politics. So the role that we're willing to play, and I kind of touched on this earlier, is we want to put pro-life policy first. We don't want to put the Republican Party first. Obviously, I lean Republican. I think a lot of us probably do. But that's not what comes first. What comes first is passing pro-life bills. And whatever we need to do to accomplish that, to save the lives of preborn babies, that's what we're going to do. We're not loyal to a specific politician. We're not loyal to a specific party. We're loyal to the cause. And that's what always comes first. So this lecture is called The Real Nature of Politics. Another name you could potentially give it is Don't Let Politicians Gaslight You. Okay, so what is politics? Now, as a Catholic, my first language is Latin. I'm just kidding, that's not true. I don't speak a word of Latin, but I've been told that politics, the Latin root of it is poly and ticks. Poly means many, and ticks means blood-sucking parasites. Many blood-sucking parasites, that's what politics is. Of course, it's a joke, but like all jokes, there's a little bit of a kernel of truth to it. Here's what politics is not, and I want to be clear. Politics is it's just a tool. It's neither a good thing nor a bad thing. It's just a thing, right? So politics is not inherently about looking after the common good, looking after your fellow man, saving preborn babies, even serving our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Now, those are all fantastic motivations for getting involved in politics, but that's not inherently what it is. It is neither a good nor an evil. It's just a thing. And this is really what it is. It's the adjudication of power. It's how people decide who rules who. You need a hierarchy in society, and politics is how that hierarchy gets adjudicated. It's not the art of compromise, it's the art of confrontation. Now, in some societies around the world, this is what politics looks like. It's deadly. People literally get killed. And just in case anyone is confused, this is bad. This is not a good thing. This is not the direction we want our society to go in. We're lucky because we live in a country where that's not the case. We live in a country where we largely, and I'm talking like almost 100%, have peaceful settlement of issues. We don't have, in a large-scale way, with some exceptions, I realize that, but for the most part, we don't have widespread violence in our politics. We have a system of checks and balances where the ambition and the desires of politicians for power compete against each other, right, at different levels. And I want to focus on that last one as well. Our system is not hopelessly corrupt. That doesn't mean there isn't corruption. There is corruption in politics, but it is not so corrupt that you can't accomplish the things that you want to accomplish. And this is important because sometimes people get kind of, they start to spiral in this like conspiratorial mindset where they think the system is so corrupt that you can't accomplish anything. That's not true. You absolutely can accomplish things in politics. And we've seen that firsthand in many different states. Okay, so if politics is inherently the adjudication of power, what is power? What does that actually mean? So real political power is forcing politicians to act the way you want, in this case, vote for pro-life legislation or replacing them. If you're the head of a company and you have an employee who is acting in a way that's detrimental to the company, and you can't get them to change, they just continue acting this way, you unfortunately have to let them go. In politics, we often forget this. The politicians work for us. Like, in a very real way, the politicians work for us. And we have to be comfortable with the mindset that if a politician is not voting to save preborn lives, we have to be okay with voting them out of office and replacing them with someone who's actually going to do it. And this is a question that we all have to ask ourselves. Would we rather be feared and respected or loved and manipulated? And when I say feared and respected, what I really mean by that, just to reiterate this, is willing to tell the truth. If we are willing to tell the truth about what a politician is doing to their constituents, they're not going to like it, but they're going to fear us, and they're going to be much more inclined to do the right thing and to actually vote to save the lives of preborn babies. If we're too obsessed with being liked by people, having the politicians be happy with us, right? We're not gonna be willing to do the hard things and be unpopular and put ourselves out on a limb the way we need to. Okay, and a lot of people get caught up in access. Access is the way that a lot of political lobbying organizations operate. And on less controversial issues, access actually works pretty well. If you're talking about corporate taxes, right? Something most people don't really think about that much. If you're talking about, like, I don't know, the electrical grid, the type of highly technical issues that people don't really think about much, actually access-based politics works pretty well. When it comes to controversial issues, which abortion is probably the most controversial issue in the country, it's, some competition there, but it's up there. Access-based lobbying doesn't work because the politicians and their base have fixed views on that issue. You're not going to go into their office and in a 10-minute conversation change their mind on abortion, right? But what you can do is show them that they need to vote the right way in abortion to keep their seat in office. So that's what we're trying to do, and that's not access-based lobbying. That's what access-based lobbying looks like. You're begging them to do the right thing. We don't want to beg them to do the right thing. We're their boss. That's us, right? And if they start to perceive us that way, you're going to see a lot more pro-life bills passing. So unless you're politically feared, you will not be politically respected. It's a hard thing, especially for people who, are just by nature, like, kind, agreeable people, which I try to be. It can be a hard thing to accept, but when you understand that all you're doing is telling the truth, it becomes a little easier to understand, that this is the right thing to do. And because repetition is the key to learning, would you rather be feared and respected, or would you rather be loved and manipulated? There's no in between. It's one or the other, and you have to make a choice. So the system works, but probably not the way you were taught. This is the real political science. The political science that you learn in a political science major at a modern, progressive university is not necessarily 100% right. These are some of the things that you might not hear in those classes. But they are nonetheless true, and the left very much knows that these things are true. So if you put these things to work, if you take this to heart, this will work on, and I'm going to add something to this, this will work on nearly every controversial issue, right? Again, on really arcane technical issues like corporate taxes, it might not work in quite the same way, but when you're talking about abortion, when you're talking about LGBT, those type of issues, yeah, this stuff works. And it works at the federal level, it works at the local level, all the way up and down. And this is a quote from Morton Blackwell, who's the president of the Leadership Institute, one of the real legends of conservative politics in the last 100 years. Political success is determined by the number and effectiveness of the political activists on either side. Now, some people, when they're thinking about how to go about this, they'll try to educate the politicians. Well, we already kind of talked about why that doesn't work. If if you're sitting down with a politician for 10 minutes and you're talking to them about a highly controversial issue like abortion, you're not going to change their mind. Maybe in some super rare instances you might, but this is not something that is going to work in any kind of a repeatable way. Now, this is a little bit closer to the truth. This is educating the public. Now, educating the public, educating like our friends and family and people that we encounter about abortion is a good thing, and you should do it. The problem is, if that's what you're resting on, if that's what you are relying on in order to pass the legislation that you want to pass, it's not going to work, because if you look at the issues, like if you look at guns, for example, you know, I think like 70%, 80% of people want universal background checks, right? And yet, you know, in a lot of states, that's, you know, they don't have that. If you look at the abortion issue, I mean, unfortunately, we lose at the ballot box a lot when it comes to abortion, and yet in many different states, we have won critical fights on abortion. So public opinion being a certain way doesn't guarantee you legislative success, and it also doesn't guarantee you legislative failure, right? Because we don't live in a direct democracy. We live in a representative democracy. So the fact that 70% of the public agrees with you on something or disagrees with you doesn't guarantee a certain outcome. So there's really two theories, and this is kind of an abbreviated version of this lecture, but the indirect path to power is what we're talking about, and that's what we want to be on. There's two theories. The education theory, which is not completely wrong, but it's very incomplete, and there's the mobilization and confrontation theory. And what this basically means is that, you know, you have a lot of people who are already pro-life. They already agree with us on this issue, but they are unwittingly voting for a lot of candidates who say that they're pro-life, but they're not actually doing things once they're in office that are helping the cause in any way. And in many cases, they're actively harming the cause, and they don't know that. Like these voters, these pro-life voters who are on our side, don't know that. So when we mobilize them, we demonstrate to the politicians that they can't just rely on these people's votes. They actually have to earn these people's votes by doing the right thing and by saving preborn babies. So how do you do this? How do you mobilize people? How do you become politically feared? You control their environment. You create an environment in politics, in whatever state you're in or whatever county you're in, or hopefully at the federal level, which is harder but not impossible. You create an environment where the politicians have to do what you want them to do. They have to save the lives of preborn babies. They have to pass, you know, a chemical abortion ban, a life conception act. The nature of politicians, and most of them don't even realize that they're doing this, but when they enter elected office, they subjugate their humanity for their ambition. Their whole existence becomes about their ambition, staying in office, climbing the ladder, you know, running for a new office. And a lot of times, the reason that this happens, so you'll have people run for office with good intentions, and I've seen this happen so many times. You'll have someone who's a good pro-life person, and they run for office, and they're a little naive, because most people who run for office are naive. They're not experts on this stuff. You know, they make promises, they get support from the pro-life community, and then they get in office, and the system just descends on them. And all these special interests and leadership just descends on them, and they'll give them all these reasons why it's just not the right time. It's just not the right time to pass pro-life legislation. And they're naive, so they believe them. You know, and the dirty little secret there is that it's never the right time. In the eyes of leadership in a lot of states, and in the eyes of these special interest groups, it's never the right time. And so if these politicians continue believing these people, we're never going to get anything done. We're never going to pass the laws that we need to pass to save lives. So again, this is the real political science. It's understandable. It's predictable. You can rinse and repeat these tactics, and we have done this in many, many different states. You can, you know what's going to happen, right? So a lot of times you'll hear when you're engaged with politicians in a certain state, well, that's not how this works in this state. That's not how we do things, right? It's nonsense. This works the same way almost everywhere. So this is how you control the environment of politicians. There's pleasure and there's pain. This is what political pleasure looks like. Now that's Tommy Tuberville. He's actually a pretty good politician. But this is what pleasure looks like for a politician, right? He's got all these students around him. They're either happy with him, they're giving him an award. Savannah's one of them. He's happy, right? He's got support. But if you look at all of those things and you reverse them, that's political pain. So if good press is political pleasure, bad press is political pain. If being the center of attention is political pleasure, being ignored is political pain. And so our job is to use that pleasure and pain to create an environment where they do what we want them to do. Now we do that by forcing them on the record with tough roll call votes. And again, not weak stuff like pro-life license plates that they can get away with, voting yes and saying that they're this great pro-life champion. We want to put them on the record on tough pro-life votes. Things that actually separate the wheat from the chaff and show us who's really with us, who actually is interested in saving the lives of babies. And this is where you get really unpopular, right? With leadership, with special interests, with politicians, because they don't want to go on record. Again, inertia. It's much easier for them to do nothing. It's hard for them to do something controversial. You're asking them to do something controversial here. And in doing so, you can see who's really with you. And you demand immediate action. And they have to know that if they vote the wrong way, there are going to be electoral consequences for that. You're going to tell their constituents. And if they're in a Republican district and their constituents tend to be pro-life, their constituents aren't going to be happy with them. And this is where I said, an alternative name for this lecture could be "Don't let politicians gaslight you." Well, this is where they try to gaslight you. Okay? And you have to ask yourself, if you believe them, when they come to you and they say, that you shouldn't tell their constituents, about what they're doing behind the scenes to kill pro-life bills, if you believe them and you do what they say, how does it benefit them? And this is a really, really important point, okay? Because this will happen over and over again if you really try to do, mobilization, confrontation type of politics. You're going to hear this stuff repeatedly. Because they want you to go away. Because if you go away, they get to stay in office, and it doesn't matter what they do. It doesn't matter what they do on pro-life issues. It doesn't matter what they do on LGBT, whatever. It doesn't matter. They can just sit back, stay in office, keep their seat, and they don't have to worry about what you want. But if you put pressure on them, all of a sudden they got to make a choice. They have to decide whose side they're on. Yep. So these are some of the ways that they will respond to the pressure. They will whine. They'll sometimes threaten you. They'll try to buy you off. Eventually, at the end of all this, after they've exhausted all these options and you haven't caved in, they just might vote your way. Even people who you thought would never vote your way on abortion, like just the squishiest Republicans that, are just totally, with the pro-abortion lobby, will sometimes vote your way if you manage to put this kind of pressure on them and change their environment. And these are some of the excuses that they will give for not acting. I think we're running out of time here, so I'll go quick. They will sometimes make threats to you, and this can be a really difficult thing when you encounter it. But again, you have to ask yourself, how important is this? I mean, we're talking about lives here. This is one of the most important issues, probably the most important issue. So if we're going to spend the sheer amount of resources that we spend trying to change America on this issue, we want to do it to win. We want strong legislation, not weak stuff. We want to actually save lives, and we want to really put politicians on the spot and make them choose, make them pick a side. And we want to tie legislative season in with electoral season. The politicians want to separate those two. They don't want the results of their elections to have anything to do with what they're doing in office, because then they can just sit back and do nothing, and they can just keep getting elected. But we want to actually tie those things together. The things that you do in office are going to impact whether or not you get reelected. Yep. So real quick, I'm going to do some case studies. This is a really good example of, I mentioned earlier, there are states that literally have 80% Republican legislatures, where it's like pulling teeth to get anything done in terms of pro-life. Wyoming is one of those states. So the governor in Wyoming is someone who's just been really squishy on abortion for a long time and has just put up roadblock after roadblock. And he's a Republican. He's got an R next to his name. But unfortunately, not super committed to the issue. So from 2021 to 2023, which is when we actually passed the chemical abortion bill in Wyoming, and we're still playing there. We're still trying to pass Clean Water Act this year, which I know Christy's going to talk about. But we had to put all kinds of pressure on a bunch of different legislators in Wyoming just to get chemical abortion legislation passed, which makes no sense, right? It's an 80% Republican state. What do you have to lose? Just save the babies. And yet, for some reason, these people are just so afraid of their own shadow that they're not willing, even in a state like Wyoming, where it's not going to cost them, they're not willing to go on the record. So you can see the abortion lobby. You can see by that quote down at the bottom, they definitely noticed what we were doing, and they were not happy about it, because for a long time,
that's great.
Exactly, right? They were getting their way for a long time, and then all of a sudden things changed, and they were kind of like, what happened? Well, what happened was us. We started holding the politicians accountable. We stopped doing access-based lobbying, and we put them on the spot with tough votes. So we did mail. There were a bunch of challengers to kind of squishy Republican legislators that weren't great on the issue. A bunch of them lost. They had pro-life voters, and when they heard what their elected officials were doing, they decided to vote them out of office. And ultimately, in March of 2023, we did manage to pass our bill and stop chemical abortion in Wyoming. So we made history in a way. And then I'm just going to go real quick through South Carolina. So in South Carolina, we were trying to pass a Life Conception Act, and these 3 Republican senators, which colloquially referred to as the sister senators, they got all kinds of public praise from like the New York Times. I think they got some kind of award from Harvard. They filibustered our bill. These are Republicans. They filibustered our bill. They made a big stink about it. We mobilized to tell their voters what they were doing, and their voters decided to throw them all out of office because they actively opposed legislation that would have saved the lives of countless babies. So I think things are going to be a little bit different in South Carolina going forward, and it's a priority state for us in 2025. We're coming back again because, even when we don't succeed, we just keep coming back year after year, and we just hammer away at it, and we change the environment. And I think we got a pretty good chance of success in 2025. So it's going to take courage to force change, but you have to really be willing to get out of your comfort zone. And you have to be okay with the fact that not everyone's going to like you. Some people are going to yell at you. Some people might do a lot worse than that. But at the end of the day, it's worth it because we are actually saving the lives of real human beings. Yep. So with that, turn it over to you guys to talk about some of the specifics of legislation.
So my name is Christy Hamrick. I'm the Vice President for Media and Policy with Students for Life Action, and I work with Savannah Deritage. She works on the federal policy. Mark works, they're kind of doing the nitty-gritty of who are we going to contact and all that. My piece of the puzzle has to do with what we're talking about when we're there. You know, it's a communication, though. It's a team effort. And I think that's what's really exciting about working with Students for Life, and to any of you who are interested in getting involved at the state level, there's going to be policy that we're working on and people that we're working on, both, to the end of making abortion unthinkable and unavailable. But this just fundamentally where we're at, oh good, you've got the slide thing up. Technology is not my favorite thing, but talking is. One of our goals is going to be defunding Planned Parenthood, and that is not a small goal. Family Research Council's direct deposit report notes that since 1993, more than $10.35 billion have gone to Planned Parenthood. You keep hearing the phrase $700 million. What are we going to do with $700 million? Kristen has said it from the front of the room a couple times. That's what they got according to their last annual report, mostly in form of various so-called healthcare programs, but to be clear, killing people is not healthcare. If pregnancy is not a disease cured by abortion, and yet in the name of healthcare, Planned Parenthood gets millions and millions of dollars. There's the Weldon Amendment, the Dornan Amendment, there's the Hyde Amendment. There is a ton of different little protections out there which are going to chip away at how we can give abortion vendors money. I know you don't want to give them any, but they get a lot. One of our primary goals is to expand that, to debar and defund Planned Parenthood. The way to do that is, let's be clear, how many people in here have ever had a job? You can raise your hand on that. Okay, so here's the thing. Your boss can't get pissed at you and decide not to pay you on Friday because they're a little angry at you. That's not possible. To be fired, there has to be a reason for the most part in most places of employment. You're a bad employee, they're going to write you up, and they're going to fire you for cause. Now, Savannah works for me. I can't decide not to pay her. I could decide not to give her a bonus. Of course I will, because she's amazing. But bonus money and days off and extra benefits are different. You've heard of Doge? You guys have heard of Doge? They're going to try to cut it with Doge. Doge can get at bonus money, extra days off, little benefit packages outside of the salary. But Planned Parenthood, you might say, is on salary because they have filled out the paperwork to comply with all kinds of healthcare programs. So to stop paying them, we need to debar and defund them. That is a process for saying you are a bad actor. You don't report sex crimes. There's Medicaid, Medicare fraud. There are lawsuits out there that you're a racist work environment. There are allegations that you were improperly making money from the sale of baby body parts. Now, it's technically illegal to sell human remains, whether your body is being donated to be used in research, even as an adult. But what Planned Parenthood is doing right now, according to allegations, is they're giving late-term babies to researchers for free. But if any of the patents from the research yield funds, they get a cut. That's one of the ways they're getting money. That's illegal. For us to fire Planned Parenthood, we need to go after them as a bad actor. That's one of the things that we're going to do. That's one of the policy agendas that we're going to bring to the state and federal level. It's going to be very complicated. I ask you guys to be patient and not give up. But we are taught, Savannah and I met with about, 50 different legislators on Thursday. We do, like I said, a lot of the federal policy. Mark and I just went to a state event pitching different kinds of policy. But in regards to cutting Planned Parenthood, we're trying to tell people it is both possible and necessary. And where you're going to see the results of those requests are in our scorecard. Let me turn this over then to Savannah for the next part. We're going to go back and forth to talk about when you've got an issue like funding and an agenda of bringing attention to people's records, so to speak, how does that practically function? So, Savannah.
No, that's great. Thank you. So like Christy said, I'm the Government Affairs Coordinator, Students for Life Action. So I know it's kind of a broad title, but basically I'm the federal lobbyist. So my job, 90% of the time, is keeping Republicans accountable. people ask me, oh, so how do you work with the Democrats? That must be so difficult. I'm like, I don't even bother with the Democrats. They all vote against Born Alive. So I have a hard enough time getting Republicans to vote in favor of, that say that they're pro-life to vote in favor, or not vote, but actually co-sponsor pro-life legislation. So that's where it gets to our report card with Students for Life Action. That's one of the ways we keep Republicans, especially on the Hill, accountable to protect life and law. Unfortunately, at the federal level, things are a lot harder to get done. You probably only see maybe 1 to 2 pro-life bills being voted on every Congress, and every Congress is 2 years. That's like nothing. So, and it's usually Born Alive in the last couple rounds of the last few Congresses. So, of course, Republicans are going to vote in favor of Born Alive. I would hope so, and so far that is the case. But then everyone would get A's, and every Republican does not deserve an A. That is for sure in the Hill. So what we score a lot on is co-sponsorships and support of legislation. If they send letters, like for example, we encouraged Senator Rubio's office and Congressman Burkine's office did a bicameral letter to the EPA asking them to do research on the waterways in regards to abortion pollution, which Christy has gone into a lot earlier if you guys went to her talk earlier. But that is something that we score on, and that we're like, that is true pro-life champions right there. They're taking extra actions outside of pro-life votes to work to protect life and law at the federal level. And since we can't get a lot done on the Hill, unfortunately, like it's a lot of letters, co-sponsorship, committee action, like leaders in appropriations committees, if they try to put pro-life protections in our spending bills, like getting rid of abortion travel policy in the VA, like that's small ways at the federal level that we can score legislators on, and that they become pro-life champions if they go through those extra hoops to do stuff like that, which can be hard at the federal level. But what makes a bad member is if they do absolutely nothing, they don't talk about the issue, all they do is vote in favor of Born Alive, and they're like, I'm an amazing pro-life member. Nope, that doesn't cut it. They usually get a bad score with it. Like, obviously we're gonna count that vote for Born Alive, but that doesn't give you many points there. That's a very, very basic thing that they need to vote in favor for. So good members go above and beyond and do those small actions of even like letters, committee actions, and some examples of bad members. Senator Murkowski, Senator Collins, and Nancy Mace. Those are people that we will be primarying, and we have in the past, because they are terrible Republicans that don't vote pro-life, or not. Only Born Alive is really that they'll vote in favor for. So that's kind of on the side of when it comes to keeping them accountable congressionally. But I'll give it back to Christy here.
So we already talked about the money. In the context of this congressional year, both federal and state, we are interested in working within the framework of Trump, because that's the framework that we're in. Let's be practical. So what does that mean? President Trump says that he wants to reduce federal involvement in abortion. It's ridiculous to say he can get it all gone, and then it's going to go back to the states. But it's federal if we pay for it. I already talked about defunding. Here's the second thing, though. If we're going to deal with the way that he has described it right now, then we're talking about the weaponization of all kinds of agency efforts, the weaponization of government. Obviously, there was the Abuse of the Face Act, the 23 people pardoned earlier, which is great. The Department of Justice coming out saying that they're not going to abusively use the Face Act. Frankly, it needs to be gone. That's on our agenda. But we put out, following the election, the roadmap. You can read more about it in terms of the fine print of where we're going. But there is no more weaponized policy today in America than chemical abortion pill policy. 3 Democratic Party presidents forced these pills onto the market and slowly deregulated it. Bill Clinton ran on pushing it through, and when in 2000 he did. Then Barack Obama deregulated it, and then the Biden-Harris administration, in the name of COVID, practically wiped out all health and safety standards. Chemical abortion pill, no test, online distribution exposes women to injury, infertility, death, and abusers. 4 times more dangerous to women than a surgical abortion, 10 times the rate of death, and that's when the pills are working. It's a disaster, the way that these pills are handled. So one of the large frameworks that we're going to look at in regards to legislation, and I'll do one more round on this later, is the roadmap is a constitutional roadmap, and this is why I say it's constitutional. How many of you guys have ever heard of Carhart v. Gonzalez? During the height of Roe's power, we took a look at the methods and means of abortion and identified partial birth abortion as a method and means that we could get rid of. The baby was delivered late in pregnancy, all but the head. stabbed in the back of the neck with a pair of scissors, the brain was suctioned out, and then the baby was delivered dead. So we took a look at that in terms of the risk to women, in terms of the damage to their cervix with the scissors, in terms of the barbarity of it. And we were able to win a case all the way up to the Supreme Court to stop partial birth abortion. So what we did in regards to this post-Dobbs, post-Trump election era is we created the roadmap to identify a method and means of abortion for its dangers to women, for its dangers to the preborn, clearly, but in this case also for its dangers to the environment. Right now, you are drinking people's abortions, you personally. More than 6 in 10, I would argue 8 in 10, because we don't have a national abortion reporting law, the medical waste, chemically tainted blood, placenta tissue, and human remains are being flushed into our waterways and cycled back. I'm going to talk more about that later. What our roadmap does in a package of legislation is look at this method and means of abortion for the ways in which it harms people, the environment, helps abusers, you fill in the blank. We've got some great legislation, but we believe that that is a way forward, and it is a way to hold people accountable. Because, even if you're pro-abortion, don't you still want clean drinking water? I mean, even if you're pro-abortion, do you want women to die because we couldn't take the time to require an ultrasound? So it provides a novel way for us to argue about it in a constitutional framework, and I think we're going to have a lot of success with it. So back to you.
And on kind of piggybacking off of that, the main federal initiatives that we're focusing on at the federal level are defunding defunding and debarring Planned Parenthood, like Christy said earlier, and then chemical abortion through especially the environmental perspective, the creative route, where because we obviously, unfortunately, as much as I would love to, can't pass a Chemical Abortion Prevention Act tomorrow federally. So instead, let's go after the industries that are abusing their power and abusing women and children, and go through the environmental route, which we think has really good teeth and can do some great damage on a chemical abortion cartel. But some of those are chemical abortion prevention acts that we've introduced, inspired legislation from our organization. We've worked with Congressman Ogles on that bill. It was introduced Wednesday, again, this Congress, and we introduced it for the first time last Congress. It's a full-on prevention act of chemical abortion, as well as we're working on a Senate and House sponsor for a requirement of a catch kit, a wastewater catch kit for chemical abortion, anyone that takes chemical abortion pills or distributes them. So we're working on that as one of our initiatives at the federal level. The Protecting Life on College Campus Act has been a long-standing inspired piece of legislation of ours as well. That would prevent any federal funds from going to schools and universities that offer funding and resources to chemical abortions on their campuses, which, as we know, chemical abortion is the leading distributor of abortions, and it's probably more than 64% than what the Guttmacher Institute reports, because there's no, as Christy said, no abortion reporting law. It's probably way more than that. In Europe, it's like in the 80s and 90s percentages. As well as keeping the FDA and EPA accountable. Like I said earlier, the bicameral letter with Rubio and Breckine, it's just letters trying to go after the agencies that have been weaponized in the Biden administration. Now we have more of an opportunity to do that. So that's been a lot of the main initiatives at the federal level with chemical abortion defunding, especially through the appropriations process, because fortunately through the Biden administration, they did a lot of damage with funding abortion and putting in loopholes in legislation that wasn't caught, even though it was illegal. So that's the main thing we've been working on.
Make America healthy again. We do believe that with our work in advocacy to HHS, the FDA, and the EPA, that we're going to hear about the conversation of chemical abortion more aggressively. The head of the EPA was up for hearings this week. I think you've all heard of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., very involved in the issue of the environment. We do think that we're going to find a person there willing to talk with us about this issue, because the issues with chemical abortion in the environment are very severe. If you take a vitamin or most drugs, there are active ingredients in any drug that you take. They're called active metabolites. And as they pass through your body, they become inactive. So most of the things that you consume, as they pass through your digestive system, it turns off. Chemical abortion pills aren't like that. The same company that developed the drugs that killed the Jews, the same company that gave Auschwitz to the Nazis, that was a former facility. They gave the seed money to a French researcher for an unpregnancy pill And it is not a natural component. It is not a form of contraception. It's not a double dose of anything. This is a deadly concoction designed to block progesterone. Here's the thing, men, you need progesterone too. Progesterone's involved in everybody's fertility, male and female, from sperm motility to ability to get pregnant. It's got to do with mental functions. Who here would like to use their brains? I know, can I get an amen? So the fact that these drugs pass through a woman's body, these unnatural concoctions, and block progesterone, and then go into our wastewater system, and then because, like, did you know California, they drink toilet water? Fairfax County, they drink toilet water. There are cities all over the country where you don't know you are drinking recycled toilet water. My friends, you are drinking people's abortions. If we want to make America healthy again, we're going to need the EPA to do their job and monitor the forever chemicals of chemical abortion. We're going to need to re-examine the pill protocols at the FDA. There's a thought. And we're going to need HHS to stop cheating in the way that they push chemical abortion pills. So even in a Trump administration, in our view, that's no need to sterilize America with these pills, to kill your brain cells and God knows what else. Go out and take a look at endocrine disruptors and see if you think we're on common ground. And that's where we see this issue in common ground. And what we like about environmental law is it has teeth. So as Mark already said, in most pro-life laws, we are asking, please, please protect life, don't hurt women. But environmental law has teeth. And God willing, we're going to use those teeth for a righteous cause. So let me turn it back to Savannah on what we're doing next, but join us in looking forward to some lawsuits.
And you remember, we have a duty to be a voice for the voiceless. It says in Proverbs 31 that we as Christians have a duty to be a voice for the people that need that. And the preborn are those people that need our voice because they cannot speak up for themselves. So you have the right to stand up for their rights, and you have the right to free speech. And unfortunately, especially in today's society, a lot of that is taken away from us. On public universities, all the time, students are being persecuted for having their voice and speaking up for the preborn. So remember, you have free speech rights. And we are here to help you in that. So please let us know at freespeech@studentsforlife.org if you ever have an issue. We are more than happy to help you in that. Unfortunately, since Dobbs, violence and free speech rights have been very much abused and are taken away. So we need to make sure that we stand up for ourselves and don't allow people to walk all over us. And then on to the next thing. Please get involved. As I was a student with Students for Life for 3.5 years, I did several fellowships, including the Student Spokesperson Program, Wilberforce Fellowship, State Captain. Every single one helped me so much in my work today. Each one had a very specific focus, and I highly encourage you to apply for a fellowship. We have several, so if you have very niche talents, I guarantee you there's some fellowship that would work for you. You get a free trip to DC for a weekend, and you get to meet over about 200 other like-minded pro-life activists, which is amazing. I met some of my most best friends, lifelong friends through that. So I highly encourage you to apply for that. It's amazing, and also highly encourage you, what is listed here, to get involved in that with your student groups. It is, even though it might seem small, they make a big difference. So.